About the most competitive segment of the U.S. car market these days is what they call the mid-size sedan. Camry, Fusion, Accord, and that's also where the Altima plays, the all-new Altima. But does it play hard enough? Let's drive this 2013 Altima SL and check the tape. Now, as you can see, this new Altima is really new. They've done a lot to get rid of the kind of rental car doughy look it used to have. But bear in mind, we're driving an SL, top-end trim. They won't all look this good. But it's not just up against the imports you know, but the recently revived and very compelling Ford Fusion and Chevy Malibu, for example. But we're looking here at a very nicely finished cabin with much better materials than in the past. Nissan was kind of behind on that compared to the competitors. To the head unit, this is not the top end. You're going to find we don't have navigation here. That is available. I'll talk about that in a minute. What we do have, though, now is this colored display. All the sources you really care about are here. The dumb ones aren't, so this works really well. USB for iPod and thumb drive is down there. AM and FM is over here with satellite radio next to it. No HD radio in this car, by the way. And of course, your optical slot is here. Auxiliary can bring up an aux jack, which is right there, dying to be snapped off, or your Bluetooth streaming, like I have my phone connected. And notice we have some really nice meta tags coming in. Everything fits on the screen well. They've used the real estate nicely. This is your controller that lets you roll through selections or press enter. It's a simplified version of the controller you see on the more elaborate head units. So we do have Bose sound on this guy. It's not terribly fancy. There's no fancy DSP in here. It's just bass, treble, balance, better speakers, better amps. I see a center channel up there, for example. So overall, a very successful interface, except in one area. The real gripe I have is these guys have the worst case of sub-buttonitis. Look at this. AM and FM are one button. Satellite radio's another button. Well, if you're going to do that, why don't you give AM, FM, and satellite a button? CD and aux go together, but not all the alternate sources because iPod gets its own button. This is silly. Just give me a source button. That's not going to confuse anybody. We've been dealing with source knobs on stereo receivers since the late 50s. It's not a new concept, and it's a much better organizing principle than this sub-nonsense. This isn't the only car maker that does it. Now, what I wish we had was what they call the technology package. That would upgrade this to a 7-inch screen, put navigation in there. It's not a connected unit per se, but it does have Google-fed points of interest. So your POIs stay fresh and also send to car. So you can send from your desktop a destination that you want available when you get there. Not bad. That package also brings in something interesting called moving object detection. You would have cameras all around the car, which we've seen before on Nissans, the around view, but it would also be doing artificial intelligence to detect if there's anyone walking around the car you're about to run into, especially in parking garages and things like that. Now, the other screen in this car is this one between the gauges here. Finally, a beautiful helper LCD in an affordable Nissan. And you can page through that to get tire pressure, MPG info, some various vehicle alerts, your settings for the screen, and your lane departure and blind spot indications. Rear camera, of course, on a car with a screen, very small. This is the only place where I find the screen's a little bit tight, and the camera tends to run a little dim as well. No trajectory, just some basic distance markings. One choice only on the Altima. No matter what model you get, you're going to get what they call their Xtronic CVT. It's a continuously variable transmission. You have a drive and a drive sport position, which will change the behavior a bit. And of course you have paddles, but interestingly, look at them. They're mounted on the column. This is really unusual, and I like it. To place shifter paddles here on the wheel and fix them supposes that you're going to always keep your hands there. Who the hell does that? Okay, under the hood, it's a Nissan. Follow along with me. 3.5-liter V6. This one sits side saddle, drives the front wheels only. 270 horsepower, 251 foot-pounds of torque. This car weighs about 3,300, but it gets up to 60 in a very nice 5.7 seconds with this bigger engine. There's also a 2.5-liter 4, whole different story. And we're getting 2231 EPA estimates on this car. And part of that MPG, which is pretty good, comes from the fact that this year's CVT has a wider array of ratios it can synthesize, if you will, allowing it to even better keep this engine in the sweet spot. Now, another cool piece of cabin tech on this Nissan barely lives in the cabin. It's mostly out here. See that tire pressure warning? Says I've got a badly low left front. So what you do is you start pumping up the tire, and this car is going to flash its hazards to acknowledge that you're doing that. Then when you get to the right pressure, it's going to beep once, and that's when you stop. Let's say you go over, you keep going, you're chatting on your phone or something. It's going to now flash the hazard lights faster, and you're going to get 3 beeps. It gets really upset. So you start to let air out on the valve down here until you get 1 beep again, and you know you're back where you should be. Kind of foolproof, kind of cool. Now, because we have the Altima V6, we have no lack of power, no lack of responsiveness. The car has got a very quiet cabin. The engine makes a persistent note. You hear it all the time. I'm also not a real big fan of the ride quality except on the smoothest roads. It's a firm suspension, that's great, but it's annoyingly transmissive. I'm getting too many little, those little potholes that big. I don't want to feel those. I'll bet they do a recalibrate next year to soften up the ride. Steering feels great, it's not over-assisted, and a really comfortable cabin. They've done a nice job keeping it spacious. There's good shoulder room, not a lot of fall in here on this line of the body to make you feel claustrophobic. And these seats really are some of the nicest I've driven in a while. Okay, pricing a 2013 Altima SL top stack $31,290 with destination rolled in. There's only one option you've got to get to go CNET style, and you will do this because it's a scorching deal. That tech package, it's only $1,090 to get you 7-inch navigation with Google POIs and send to car. You're also going to end up with lane departure warning, blind spot warning, and the multiple cameras around the car that do object detection. It sounds like a typo at that price, but it's a nice package on this car.